Man, Iota, I am really struggling here. I mean, it's supposed to be my 10th anniversary, but it just feels sorta small. I mean, it's just me and you. I'd say it's just like the old days, but back then I didn't even have you yet.
You could call up some friends to help you out. What about the professor?
That's not a bad idea, but he's been pretty busy ever since he went back to his home universe to take that scientific advisory position with the US government. I don't blame him, he did pretty well for himself. The pay is definitely better.
But sir, you didn't pay him.
Exactly.
What about some of your reviewer friends? Surely it hasn't been that long since your last collaboration, has it?
Also true, but everyone's a bit busy nowadays. Heck, so am I. Who would have guessed that having a job dedicated to books would make it really hard to indulge in my hobby dedicated to books? Besides, doing a crossover would mean that I would need to work out a script, and that could take weeks. And I don't have weeks. The video's supposed to go out tomorrow. The only way that could work is if I did a crossover with someone who I'm always on the same page with. Someone whose rugged good looks have only gotten better with age.
Oh dear.
Someone who won't argue with me about jokes, and someone who I'll always agree with. I've got it! I'll do a crossover with myself! I mean, it's about time for another Multi-Michael adventure. We haven't had one in like, 7 years. Iota, boot up that temporal transmitter my future self gave me.
Aye, sir.
Although, he did tell me to only use it in case of emergencies. But if he's really my future self, he had to have known I was going to use it for something stupid. Iota, to the bookshelf! Is this thing on? Who are you?
You know who I am.
No, I don't. Isn't it obvious? We look exactly alike. I'm your future self. My future self? What? Have you not met one of us before? Huh, weird. The temporal transmitter's not really an exact science, so I don't really know exactly when it contacted me. You. So, when is it for you? Have you fought Mike Sano yet? Mike Huo? Oh, wow, really? It must be pretty early in the year for you, then. What about our Mirror Universe counterpart? Have you met him yet? Wait, the Mirror Universe from Star Trek? That's real? Whoa, it must be really early days, then. Just tell me, what was the last book you reviewed? Last book I reviewed? I haven't. I was, just about to review this one. Oh, boy. This is gonna take some explaining. Hey guys, what's going on? Oh, hey, past me! Oh, wow, long time no see. I mean, I actually just got finished up with that whole Three Doctors fiasco myself. Yeah, he doesn't remember that? Oh, okay, then. It's nice to meet you. Does this happen a lot in the future, meeting my future selves? It does start to happen, yeah, but anyway, we're just waiting for one more, and then I'll be able to explain this whole situation to you guys. Ah, here we are. Hello, gentlemen. You've redecorated. I don't like it. And my past self. Wow, I was so young then. Oh, come on, that was like a year ago for you. And what a year it's been. Alright, I forgot how overconfident I was back then. Anyway, I've gathered you guys all here for a very important mission. So what's up? Is Mike Sano invading the multiverse again? Mike Sano, I hate that guy. Where is he? Let me at him. Whoa, guys, calm down. It's not quite that serious. Allow me to explain. You see, for me, it's 2022, and that means it's the year of the show's 10th anniversary. And I figured that a great way to celebrate would be with a grand crossover. But I figured that if I'm going to be celebrating 10 years of the show, what better way to celebrate than by bringing all the eras of the show together? And besides, who says we need some grand threat to unite us all together? Sounds fair to me. I'm always game for a good crossover. But if we're uniting all of our other selves, isn't there someone you're forgetting? Forgetting someone? Oh, right! I completely forgot about him. Iota, patch future me into the call. There's more of you? Great Scott, all of my younger selves together. There must be some great calamity that needs to be stopped. Actually, it's the 10th anniversary, and I was wondering if you maybe wanted in on the crossover? The 10th anniversary? Oh no. They found me. I'm about to be dragged into a time eddy and trapped in the time vortex. Good luck, my dears. Good luck. Oh no. Damn it. How do I turn this damn thing off? Screw it. I finally managed to save myself for a minute, but oh no, I'm being dragged in again. Oh no. Yeah, that about tracks. Anyway, who's up for a crossover? Raise your sonics and roll the theme song. Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair, and to our 10th anniversary video. 10 long years ago, I created this show. Although it didn't yet have a name, or a consistent intro sequence, or even a decent camera or editing skills. Hey! No offense, but over the years I learned how to write scripts, how to hone my editing skills, and implement more analytical methods instead of just recapping the book's entire plot with a small paragraph of commentary at the end. Hey! Right, sorry. And now, 10 years later, I'm still learning. And even though I stand by pretty much everything I've ever made, I don't really think that anything I made more than 4 or 5 years ago is really any good anymore. Hey! Great, now that everyone's offended, what I mean is thank you all for coming on this journey with me, and while I'm not sure if I'll still be doing this in another 10 years' time, the fact that I've lasted this long is utterly remarkable to me, and considering what I've accomplished in these 10 years, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. But enough about that. I know that this had a rather long intro because I had to get the band together, so let's skip to what we're discussing today. My first video was, or rather in the case of my youngest self, will be, Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion, which was both a novelization of the first story to feature a new era of the show beginning, and the introduction of the Nestene consciousness. So it seems rather fitting that, after BBC Books regenerated the target line, that we take a look at the novelization of another first of a new era, and one that also featured the Nestene consciousness with Rose. As Terrance Dicks introduced the Autons in 1970 to bring Doctor Who both into the unit era and the era of colour TV with Jon Pertwee, so did Russell T Davies in 2005 when he brought them back to introduce us both to Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor and Billie Piper as Rose Tyler, both of whom have recently returned to those roles for Big Finish productions. And come to think of it, so is the Third Doctor. And where was I going with this? If I may jump in here, I think I've finally gotten acclimated to this whole weirdness. So I just want to say that Rose was one of the first episodes of Doctor Who that I ever saw. Just around a year or so ago, from my perspective, 2011, after watching Curse of the Black Spot and The Doctor's Wife on TV one Saturday night after hearing a friend talk about Doctor Who in school, I started DVRing every episode that was on TV because I knew I was in the middle of a season and wanted to catch up on Series 6. But because the show had been on for so long, I ended up catching some older episodes that were rerunning at the time, in addition to, the current stuff. So I ended up seeing, I think, The Unquiet Dead, and then Rose, and color me surprised when I realized after watching it that it was the first episode of the modern series. And I think it's a great episode. And I don't think I've actually watched it since then, so this'll be a fun experience. Anyway, let's get straight into the book and look at Rose. Yeah, I suppose Doctor Who and the Rose wouldn't have made sense for this one. The cover is pretty good. It's obviously trying very, very hard to emulate the original Target covers, but without some of the weirdness in the likenesses, such as weirdly lopsided Third Doctor, because it looks more like a Photoshop filter over promotional images than actual artwork, but that's fine. Even if I know that they got Rose's image from some later promotional image, likely Series 2, because Rose's hair was a lot longer in the televised episode.
Ah, but we can forgive that. After all, the Fifth Doctor's hair length was all over the place during his first season, and Sarah Jane got a spontaneous haircut, even if the end of the Time Warrior and beginning of Invasion of the Dinosaurs seemed to happen one after the other. Anyway, the cover features the Ninth Doctor pointing his sonic screwdriver, Rose just sort of looking concerned about something, and two Autons at the bottom, in addition to some artistic flourishes that look like those really out-of-place comic book effects they overlaid on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when they did that reversioning thing between RPM and Samurai.
And of course it has the classic Doctor Who logo at the top, the title underneath it, and Russell T Davies' name in big friendly letters. Although, might I add that in the reprint of Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion, Terrance Dicks, who is arguably just as big a name as Russell T Davies in the Doctor Who universe, perhaps even bigger, has his name smaller than the title.
Also, funnily enough, Davies also has his name on Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion because he wrote the introduction for the reprint.
Anything to add, 2015?
Oh, nah, you guys are doing great. No comments.
Right, so it has the Target logo in the top right, but it doesn't quite match the Target reprints. No seal of Rassilon on the back, no little doctor on the top of the side, or even the Target logo, just the BBC Books logo at the bottom. But we're not here for accuracy or to a specific design, even if it annoys me because they'd look really good on a shelf if they all look the same. We're here to review the contents, so let's get straight into it. And I think based on tradition, the youngest one should go first.
Alright, so the story opens at Henrik's department store and begins with backstory on Bernie Wilson, the senior caretaker of Henrik's, describing his fall from grace after an unfortunate incident with his supervisor, and his scheme to set up a fake lottery pool for all the Henrik's employees, pocketing the money since the odds of actually winning are so slim, and because of one of the lottery gimmicks, the lucky dip, most people wouldn't actually know the numbers that they actually played, so nobody would ever find out if they're number one or not. Unfortunately, this scheme fell apart when, after he failed to purchase any tickets in order to buy a new car, one woman's lucky numbers came out for the big jackpot, and those were numbers that she found particularly memorable, so she wanted to see the ticket so she could claim the winnings. Bernie, not having the money, stalled her and intended to burn down the department store in order to explain why he didn't have the ticket, but unfortunately, there's another scheme at work within Henrik's, one organized by a force far more powerful than a senior caretaker. But enough about Bernie. Rose Tyler doesn't have a very interesting life. She lives with her mother, goes to work at a dead-end retail job at Henrik's department store, and hangs around with her boyfriend Mickey Smith and his three friends, Mook, Patrice, and Sally, who are all in a band together, although they can't decide on a name. I think it ought to be something like Adjective Animal, like Mad Rat or something. That's a change from the televised episode. Rose's life gets more fleshed out a bit, so we get more about not only Rose, Mickey, and Jackie, but new characters to fill out the world.
But Rose feels like her life should be more interesting, particularly because of the wisdom of a drunk man on New Year's Eve 2004, who told her that she was about to have a really great year. But I don't trust that guy. He looks like a crooked army colonel. And on this rather unremarkable day, she's sent down to deliver the lottery money to Bernie, but instead finds the place deserted save for several of the shop window dummies and strange noises, neither of which are particularly strange for the bowels of a department store. But when the dummies begin to move, Rose starts shouting for them to knock off whatever student prank this is because it's scaring her. She instead finds them closing in on her. She narrowly escapes when someone grabs her arm, a big-eared chap in a leather jacket. He tells her to run and they escape, the man disarming, literally, one of the plastic dummies and tossing the arm to Rose. As he explains, the dummies are actually autons made of living plastic and controlled via a relay point on the roof of Henrik's, but he's got a plan for that. He also tells Rose that Bernie Wilson is dead and to run for her life, but not before he asks her name and tells her that he's the doctor, and she should run for her life. As she runs from the store, the place explodes and Rose rushes home, traumatized with the arm in hand.
Do our videos just evolve into non-stop puns in the future?
Yeah, sort of. She returns to her mother Jackie, who's going on and on about potential compensation and enjoying the minor celebrity that being the mother of someone whose place of work just exploded brings, and Mickey comes around to check on Rose, and Rose sends him off to throw away the arm. The next morning, Rose hears noises coming from the cat flap and thinks it's a stray, having heard noises all night, but instead finds the doctor, having tracked the arm down, which has returned to find Rose, and promptly begins strangling the doctor, and then Rose and causes the two of them to destroy Jackie's coffee table.
Honestly, it feels like every time the doctor's in that apartment, he destroys something.
Anyway, the doctor cuts it off from the Nephthene consciousness and then heads off to continue his business elsewhere. Rose follows him and demands an explanation as to what's going on, and the doctor gives a brief explanation of what it's like to be around him and then leaves Rose, vanishing in a blue box. Rose goes to Mickey's to borrow his computer and tries to Google the doctor, but of course doesn't get much until she puts in the blue box and finds a website run by Clive Finch. The book gives us a lot more backstory on Clive, explaining that his father had been one of the soldiers killed in Shoreditch during Remembrance of the Daleks, an unexplained death that fueled Clive's conspiracy theories, first getting into aliens, which introduced him to his wife, and then zeroing in on the doctor. Rose goes to visit him, keeping Mickey in the car as backup, and Clive shows her his evidence, showing images of the doctor, the one that Rose saw, but also several others, ranging from a white-haired old man to a blonde woman in suspenders, and even a young androgynous person in a high-tech wheelchair with a tin dog. I know that it's probably meant to be a more traditional wheelchair, being put in to include some disability representation, but I just can't help but imagine that this particular incarnation of the Doctor has just stolen Davros' chair again.
Huh? Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
Not a clue. Oh, right, that episode hasn't come out for you guys yet. Spoilers?
While Clive is clearly passionate, Rose thinks he's just a nut and leaves. While Mickey waits outside, he notices a strange trash can and goes to investigate it, but the plastic on the bin merges to his hands and drags him inside, and when Rose returns to the car, she finds Mickey waiting, but a Mickey that is distinctly more rigid than usual. They go out for pizza, and as much as Rose wants to talk about what she's gonna do now, Mickey is more interested in the doctor. Except Rose never told Mickey about the doctor, and they're in the process of being bothered by a nosy waiter with champagne that no one ordered. Oh, and one of Mickey's eyes falls out. Naturally, the nosy waiter is the doctor, and Mickey is added as an auton, who the doctor disarms, or rather disheads. They escape outside to the TARDIS, and Rose has a 1-2 punch of it's bigger on the inside, and oh god, my boyfriend Mickey is dead, and the doctor isn't very comforting. The doctor also explains that the Nephthene consciousness was altered by the effects of the temporal war, a time war of sorts, into becoming living plastic instead of just controlling it as they had in the past, which is a really neat addition for the novelization since it went unexplained in the episode, even if it wasn't entirely accurate to how they were portrayed in the past.
The Doctor takes Rose to their base, which turns out to be underneath the London Eye, and the Doctor intends to negotiate with them, not destroy them, not wanting any more killing than absolutely necessary, although he brings a vial of anti-plastic in case the moment arises that it becomes needed. If the Doctor's learned anything from the Time War, it was always have a backup plan. When they arrive, Rose finds Mickey, held captive to stabilize the copy, which honestly feels more like a Zygon thing to do, but anyway, as the Doctor tries to plead with the Nephthene consciousness, a giant plastic blob, to leave Earth alone and colonize an empty planet, because the war wasn't his fault, and he tried to stop it, tried to save everyone, Mickey starts to freak out, and to assuage his fear, Rose tells Mickey about the anti-plastic. But in another change from the televised episode, It's a fake-out. It's not really Mickey. It's another Auton, and the Doctor is grabbed, the TARDIS seized, the Neftine intending to absorb the Doctor, and you guessed it, use the TARDIS to take over the galaxy.
Of course!
Oh, come on, that joke is so 2012.
Well, I thought it was funny. Anyway, the real Mickey is revealed, a gibbering mess but absolutely made of flesh and blood, as the invasion begins with little vignettes about the invasion, the Taurus on the London Eye as it starts broadcasting the signal to activate the Autons, Jackie Tyler going shopping after getting Rose a form for her compensation, finding shop window dummies coming to life, and being chased by 3 brides as people are murdered all around her. Clive Finch and his family out for a night on the town, and unlike in the episode, Clive's death is meaningful, as he realizes that everything is connected to the Doctor, and while the Autons attack, he sends his wife and kids away, standing his ground, and taking the shot from the Auton to the head to buy them some time, standing up to an alien menace just like his father. Mickey's band, who has recently rebranded into Bad Wolf, Mook, Patrice, and Sally, are attacked by children's mannequins with children's strength guns that gradually get stronger and stronger. The owner of Henrik's arrives with his wife and boyfriend, intending to use a legal loophole to fleece the Henrik's employees out of compensation, but is instead met by a horde of Autons who decapitate his wife and drill a hole through his boyfriend before murdering him as well. We also see Rose's old boyfriend, who she dropped out of school for and ran off with, stealing from his current girlfriend and met by Autons who kill him for his trouble. Man, this book is dark.
Anyway, the Autons confiscate the antiplastic and hold the Doctor captive, but Rose uses the only skill that she thinks she has, a bronze medal in gymnastics, and swings Tarzan style to knock the Auton holding the antiplastic into the Neftine's vat, killing it and bringing the invasion to an end, and the entire base collapsing in around them. The Doctor and Rose grab Mickey and escape into the TARDIS, with Mickey also being given a very short time to accept the whole bigger on the inside thing. In the aftermath, the tourists are alive as their pods were jettisoned safely from the structure. Mook and Patrice realize that they're in love with each other, and Sally resolves to return home to her parents, hopeful that they might accept that she's not their son anymore, she's their daughter. But not before the trio loot a pharmacy for some bandages to help those in need, and Caroline Finch resolves to get revenge on the person responsible for her husband's death. No, not the Autons, but the Doctor. And that's a rather interesting point because we know now that Russell T Davies is returning to Doctor Who, so maybe he'll follow up on that?
Russell T Davies is returning to what?
Spoilers again. Sorry about that. Anyway, Rose calls Jackie to ensure that she's alive, which she is, and the Doctor returns Rose and Mickey to Henrik's instead of the Powell estate, the TARDIS having gotten it wrong, and at least it is in Aberdeen this time. The Doctor invites Rose to travel with him, realizing how much he missed having someone around, but Rose is planning on changing her life and taking responsibility. She's got people who need her, Jackie, Mickey, all the friends texting her phone to make sure she's okay, and the Doctor leaves in the TARDIS, never to be seen again. Except he pops back a minute later to tell Rose that it's also a time machine, so she can go adventuring and be back in time for afternoon tea if she wanted. Leaving Mickey behind, Rose runs into the TARDIS and goes off towards her next adventure, on the trip of a lifetime.
Which, if memory serves, will include a very bitchy trampoline.
There's also an epilogue that Russell T Davies released on Instagram, but it's really just a single joke that implies that the last remnants of the Neftine possessed a wild-haired blonde man in Westminster to try to orchestrate the demise of Great Britain, as a bit of political commentary directed at Boris Johnson, Prime Minister. Yes, I know who he is, and he's no Harriet Jones, that's for sure.
The novelization is really interesting, because it expands on what we saw in the episode but takes it in new directions, like telling us all about Bernie Wilson, the senior caretaker, and his history at Henrik's, in addition to how he spent a lot of his time, which obviously we didn't get in the televised episode. That's pretty typical of the novelizations. The good ones always develop the story with added background that would naturally never occur on screen due to the limitations of both budget and runtime, with the modern era being even more so limited by runtime, since the traditional length of a classic Who episode, while variable, was usually 4 as an average 25 minute episodes, which comes out to about 100 minutes, or at the very least 90, if you factor out the opening and ending credits, plus the episodes that replay the ending of the last episode.
His admittedly very long-winded point is a modern Doctor Who story is only 45 minutes long, or 60 as they commonly are now, but still not 90 minutes, which is the minimum length of a feature film. So there's a lot of space to play around between the lines for a novelization, which is where Russell T Davies really shines for me. I've always had an issue with Russell T Davies as a writer, but I realize now that it was probably just because he was being limited by time, and that meant he didn't have time to expand on the material to really elevate it. Rose is a fine episode, don't get me wrong, but the novelization, outside of some gripes that I'll get to later, or rather will have gotten to at some point in the past, God, I love time travel, is even better. It speaks to Russell T Davies' skill as a writer to really know how to flesh out a world with little flourishes of things that aren't entirely relevant, but expand on the grounded elements for the sake of character, giving us reason to both feel bad for Bernie Wilson, because the episode sure didn't give us a chance to mourn a character that we never saw, but to also not feel so bad, considering that he was a pretty bad person. In fact, with the exception of Clive, most of the people who died in this story were people who, on some level, deserved it. The owner of Henrik's being a prime example. Sure, maybe being a shitty person isn't enough to justify being brutally murdered by aliens, but if he'd been nicer, I'd at least feel a little bad about it. And to divert for a moment, I just want to talk about how incredibly dark and scary this novelization is versus the original episode. It's sort of funny that it's a Russell T Davies story and not a Moffat story, because the abject horror of everyday objects being deadly feels a lot more like Weeping Angels and is definitely a behind-the-sofa quality scary stuff that the episode proper didn't really have. Although, with all the deaths being even beyond Philip Hinchcliffe levels of dark, at least in my book, I imagine Mary Whitehouse is spinning in her grave, which makes it even more awesome. I mean, it's not just getting shot by plastic guns. There are decapitations and stabbings in a Doctor Who story! Heck, it's how I knew Mickey would still be alive, because he was just swallowed up and didn't lose a limb. It's my policy for any sort of fiction that uses fake-out deaths. They're only dead if you see a body or you can see the body disintegrate. Not to mention the body horror, it reminds me of another Russell T Davies story, Partners in Crime, with one of the mentions of plastics being ingrained in our daily lives, being plastics ingested not just through surgical implantation, but through drinking out of a plastic straw or eating with a plastic fork, and your body being overtaken by a sentient force that isn't your own doing, is terrifying.
But on to the characters. The characters are written really well. Obviously, everyone is in character, because the person who wrote the novelization was also responsible for essentially creating all of the characters that were in the episode, the Doctor notwithstanding. But apart from the Doctor and Rose, we get a lot of backstory on characters who, in the original episode, were just sort of there, like Mickey. In the original episode, we know that he's Rose's boyfriend, and he's kind of an idiot, but that's really it. But in the novelization, Russell T Davies takes the extra time to just ruin his life for seemingly no good reason. Like, in the episode when the Mickey Auton melts, Rose remarks that she'll have to tell Mickey's mother that he's dead. But in the novelization, Rose remarks instead that she'll have to tell the kids at the estate, Mickey's uncle, and the band. Why? Because Russell the Davies decided that not only did Mickey's father abandon them when he was a kid, but his mother Odessa couldn't cope with it and committed suicide as a result, leaving Mickey in the care of his grandmother, who, if you've seen the Rise of Cybermen Age of Steel, you know died because she took a header down the stairs because of a broken carpet that Mickey never fixed and felt insanely guilty about until he finally met the alternate version of that grandmother. And then he's abandoned by Rose at the end while still a gibbering mess in the middle of the rubble of Henrik's. And then he's accused of killing Rose in the intervening time between this and the aliens of London, which is even worse when you consider that Rose has a history of running off with strange men, considering her ex-boyfriend, the one who got killed by the Autons. So Jackie accusing Mickey of murdering Rose is even worse when you consider that revelation. Guy can't catch a break.
And speaking of Jackie, in the original episodes, she was overbearing and pretty trashy, but that was sort of the point considering Rose's background, and she gets better later, thanks in part to Camille Kadori's excellent acting and better character beats given to her in later episodes, but in the novelization, she's almost worse somehow, because we get to see more of her motivations. Yeah, it's sad that she had to raise Rose alone after Pete died, but Rose went through a traumatic experience, and she's more worried about money than her own daughter's well-being? This isn't like Rose came home and just told her about a weird occurrence. Oh, I got chased by shop window dummies. It was on the news. The building that she worked in, that she was in only minutes before the explosion, blew up. And I rewatched the episode in preparation for this, and she's not as bad there, but only I think because we don't really get her backstory until later in the season, and by that point we're more focused on those events rather than these ones. For more positive character analysis, I like tying Clive Finch into Remembrance of the Daleks. That one makes a lot of sense. Makes his obsession with the Doctor meaningful, and it makes his death meaningful. Since in the novelization, he stands up to buy his family time, and they don't actually see him die in this one, just the aftermath, which I think is far less traumatic, but more powerful. He didn't just die to die like he did in the episode, he just got shot unawares. He died so his family might live on, just like his father. And possibly get revenge on the Doctor, but we'll have to see where that particular plot thread goes, if anywhere. Mickey's band, Bad Wolf, is an interesting aside, too. They help fill out Rose and Mickey's world, considering that I don't actually remember ever seeing Rose interact with friends other than Mickey over the course of the show, and the fact that his friends get a lot of backstory, particularly Sally, who's trans, is great, because it's something that likely wouldn't have been able to be said back then, but it's definitely something that Russell T Davies would want to show, and hopefully we'll get to show a lot more of on Doctor Who in the future.
I also think that it's great how it refers to the Time War having altered the Nestine to explain their different appearance here. It's more than we got for the Macra and Gridlock. I know a lot of people were rubbed the wrong way by that, and while I don't know if anyone disliked this particular version of the Nestines, considering that we haven't really seen it again, I certainly never had a problem with it, but I always prefer explaining changes rather than just not explaining it and treating it like a retcon. Plus, it fits with the Time War as depicted in other places. It alters the timeline, and it's entirely possible that it altered the timeline to change them at a base level. That being said, there were some changes that I wasn't entirely in love with.
Now, as much as I enjoy a good callback, obviously, sometimes callbacks can be distracting, like how Star Trek can't go 6 seconds without going, "Remember Spock? Remember he existed?" Or the entirety of Ready Player One being just, "I remember the 80s and that makes me better than you," but Russell throwing in all these references to past and future Who are a tad distracting to me. Maybe it's just me being a buzzkill, but while showing Rose images of every Doctor up to the 9th Doctor, having images of 1 to 8 was really good, and it would have made sense if the show wasn't in that iffy period where they didn't want to bog things down with references to stuff general audiences might not know about. The references to post-2005 Who were distracting to me and too much. We didn't need to see 10 through 13, even if temporally it makes sense. Frankly, I like it when the novelizations keep themselves contained to the period the episode was written in. Something that was cut from the script? Totally fine. References to stuff that hadn't even been conceived yet? I don't really like that. Another prime example is the joke about the idea of cracks in the universe erasing things, which I didn't much care for since it was a little too on the nose for my liking. Of the additions I did, however, enjoy, the little aside to see what Donna Noble was up to during the episode, considering her penchant for missing all the major invasions, was absolutely wonderful. And of all the call forwards, that one was probably my favorite. Another critique I have is I know they weren't standard in the Target novelizations. In fact, I only remember seeing them in Auton Invasion and the Cybermen, but I'd have loved some illustrations in this one, considering how much it shows that wasn't shown on screen. It's one thing for the illustrations to show us what we saw. We don't really need them in that case. But we've got a lot of stuff here that would have been really nice to have a visual idea for. The living statues near the London Eye coming to life, which wasn't in the episode. The versions of the Doctor Clive Fink shows to Rose that aren't the ones from the show at present, the bald black woman with the flaming sword, or the young androgynous kid in the high-tech wheelchair with the tin dog. I want to see that. Also, how tall is Tania Miller? Because we might have an idea on who the 14th Doctor might be.
14th Doctor? You mean Matt Smith left? You mean Peter Capaldi left? You mean Jodie Whittaker left?
Wait a minute, you're from 2015. How do you know about Jodie Whittaker? Timey-wimey? That doesn't even begin to explain... Whatever, we don't have time to unpack all that right now. We've got a review to finish. Anyone else have anything to add?
Well, like I say about novelizations, they really let us get inside the characters' heads, and I like how Rose and the Doctor feel much more developed. The Doctor felt really lived in, you know. I know they shot the 5th Doctor's first season out of order so that Davison could get acclimated to the role, so that he could make a good first impression in Castrovalva, but from what I can tell, that didn't happen with Rose. While they shot some episodes out of order in production blocks, likely to accommodate cast members and sets, Rose came first, and yet Christopher Eccleston felt truly at home in the role, which is of course sad considering the events surrounding his departure from the role. And in this novelization, that lived-in feeling comes across even stronger, and he's just fantastic. And Rose is written really well too, and because we get to delve deeper into her thoughts and feel her dissatisfaction with her life, how she yearns for adventure but doesn't get it from her boring working class life, how she tried to get it with her crappy ex-boyfriend but all she succeeded in was keeping her stuck there longer. Sure, we get that in the episode a little bit, but it's way more powerful here because it's all in the narrative as opposed to a few seeds of exposition here and there as Rose mentions it. Plus we get a deeper understanding because we have more time to spend on it versus the televised episode.
And despite being longer, in fact it clocks in at just about 200 pages, which is not that much longer than Scream of the Shalka that we looked at last year, and only about 20 or so pages longer than Doctor Who and the Auton Invasion, which we looked at 10 years ago, than the original episode, it still manages to retain a good pacing and never drags. I was reading about 3 chapters a day since I was a little busy and not able to sit down and read it all in one sitting. Besides, I like to savor my books, but there were a few times when I was like, the chapter's over already? Oh man, which is impressive. And another thing, which I think is definitely due to changing styles, that having read 10 of these novelizations before this one, most of them being written in the 70s and 80s, that Russell T Davies doesn't have the same dry feeling that I get from licensed material from back then. I get the same feeling from old Star Trek as well, a feeling that doesn't permeate in contemporary Trek books, and I'm glad to say doesn't permeate into contemporary Doctor Who novelizations, despite them deliberately aping the style. And, yeah, I guess that's it. Anyone else have anything to add?
I'm good.
No comments.
Well, maybe I could mention the symbolism of, you know what, I'm good too.
Alright then, that was Rose, a, sorry to make the same joke twice in the same review, fantastic novelization that builds on what we saw in the episode, and apart from some admittedly minor gripes, enhances the experience, even if those changes don't really gel with what we saw on screen. I guess it's like the Cybermen, parallel evolution. The original episode is great, and so is the novelization, with good pacing and even better character beats, and for it being the first true novelization since the 1996 films, it's a return to form for the Target line, and I hope that the others in the line are written just as well. I just hope they lighten up on the cheeky, in-your-face references to future episodes. But otherwise, I highly recommend it to any Doctor Who fan who perhaps isn't such a big fan of the classic series, but wants in on reading novelizations. And if you're someone who misses Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, certainly check out the new Big Finish stuff he's done. It's great, but also check out this novelization if you want your 9th Doctor fixated. And again, thank you all for joining me for the last 10 years of book reviews and following the show and supporting us, and everything, and I hope that this is not the end of our journey together, because I think I still have about 10 more years worth of books to review. Anyway, see you next time. Ah, another successful review, wouldn't you chaps say?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that. We should do it more often.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it's nice to meet up every now and then, but if we did it all the time, I think it would just cheapen it, I feel.
Besides, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to meddle this much in our own time stream. I mean, shouldn't this be causing massive anomalies or erasing us from existence? I mean, that's what years of reading sci-fi has taught me.
I'm sure things are fine. I meddle in my own time stream all the time, and nothing has ever gone wrong before. I just met my past and future self at the same time. We even took a picture together and nothing happened, see? I swear we were all in it a minute ago.
Anyway, as fun as this has been, I think we'd all better be getting back to our own bits of the time stream. After all, we all have our own videos to make. I'm finally going to finish off the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, and I bet I'll definitely stand by all these opinions a decade later.
Oh yeah, I am so glad that I burned through my favorite book series of all time during my second year reviewing, back when I was still using Wikipedia summaries to help write my reviews because I was so lazy.
See ya.
And then there were 3. But I really ought to be going. Us all being here together isn't exactly breaking the laws of time, but we are bending them. Wait a minute, didn't we use that joke already in the 3 Doctors review? Hey, it still works, right? See you next time. Seems a shame we have to part, though, just as I was getting to know me.
Hey, I know you're probably not supposed to tell me anything about my own future, but to think that I'm still doing this 10 years down the line, I've just got to ask. Is it worth it?
Is what worth it?
Starting a review show. I mean, there are so many people out there doing this that are just infinitely better than me. I mean, it's just a drop of water in the internet, isn't it? And, I mean, based on what I've seen today, I don't think I get internet famous like I wanted, so what's the point?
With all my heart, I can tell you that it is most definitely worth it. Over the next 10 years, you'll meet new friends, you'll learn so many new things about writing, production, and editing. And yes, there will be tribulations along the way, and no, you won't get famous, but I can say, most emphatically, that it is absolutely worth all the trouble.
Alright then. I guess it's time for me to go. I mean, if I don't start this video, then that means there won't be what did you call it again?
The literary lair.
Hold on, wouldn't it make more sense to call it the literature lair? Because literary is an adjective, so it sounds like you're saying that the lair pertains to the nature of books and writing, as opposed to it being a place that you talk about books. Do we really last a whole decade with a name like that?
What can I say? It was a misprint, but it grows on you.
I hope so. So you do it all again?
In a heartbeat. You've got a fantastic journey ahead of you now.
Well, here goes.
Hello and welcome. I'm definitely not the man I was. Thank God for that.
Hey guys, what's going on? And oh darn, did they leave the call already? I told you I was gonna be late. I never should have let you install those updates on my computer.
Oh yes, it's always Mike Sano's fault. It's never thank you, Mike Sano, for upgrading my computer so I could play Civilization 16.
Okay, yeah, that was pretty dope. But now I'm not going to be able to tell my past self about all the cool things that happen to us in the next 10 years.
You'll just have to take the long way round, I suppose.
I suppose so. Anyway, let's see if we can catch the end of President Goldblum's speech about the NASA budget.